Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3 Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for a quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the Workplace Minute, we're looking into workplace safety, the most basic promise any employer makes. Workplace safety is facing a quiet but consequential shift, and new data suggests federal safety inspections are declining, oversight is loosening, and the question for leaders is no longer just, are we compliant, but are we truly protecting our people? Let's break it down. Workplace safety is the most fundamental promise any employer makes to the people who work for them, and it's suddenly back in the spotlight. And not because conditions are improving, but because oversight appears to be weakening. New reporting based on internal Labor Department data shows a significant decline in workplace safety inspections by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, in the months following the return of the Trump administration. Over a 6-month period, inspections reportedly dropped by about 20% compared with the same time frame in the prior year. That's from about 29,000 inspections down to roughly 23,500. At the same time, the agency has fewer people to do the work. Federal inspectors numbered just over 700 as of mid-2025, and that's down sharply from earlier levels. That leaves millions of work sites across the country with little realistic chance of ever being inspected. And this reduction in enforcement activity comes alongside proposals to roll back certain safety regulations, including changes related to the construction lighting requirements and projections for workers exposed to hazardous chemicals. Supporters of deregulation argue that prior rules represented government overreach, and critics argue that fewer inspections and weaker standards increase the likelihood of injuries or deaths on the job. But regardless of where you fall on that political spectrum, there's a deeper issue here, and one that matters to every employer and every employee. Safety is not primarily a regulatory issue. Safety is a trust issue. When people walk into a workplace, whether that's a factory floor, a hospital, a warehouse, an office, or a construction site, they're making the silent assumption that the organization values their well-being at least as much as it values productivity, profit, or speed. And if employees begin to doubt that assumption, the consequences ripple far beyond physical risk. Psychological safety declines, employee engagement drops, and turnover rises. And eventually, tasks like recruiting get harder. And ultimately, performance and productivity suffer, and the employer's reputation takes a hit. I can't make this point any clearer. Employee safety is the foundational layer of organizational trust. You can't build a culture of innovation, inclusion, collaboration, or high performance on top of a foundation that feels unsafe, physically or psychologically. And there's the critical point for leaders right now. If external enforcement weakens, the responsibility for safety does not decrease, it actually increases. Historically, regulations have functioned as a kind of a baseline, like a floor, not a ceiling. Smart organizations never treated OSHA compliance as the definition of safety. They treated it as the minimal acceptable standard. The organizations that thrive over the long term are the ones that go beyond compliance. They design safety into their operations, training, leadership expectations, and culture. They measure it and invest in it and talk about it constantly. And they empower employees to stop work when conditions are unsafe. And they treat incidents as learning opportunities and not exercises in pointing fingers or assigning blame. And most importantly, they signal through their actions and not just slogans that their people matter. Because there's another reality that organizations should not ignore. Employees do pay attention to what governments do. So when workers hear that inspections are declining or protections are being rolled back, many will interpret that as not good news for the business. They will interpret it as no one's looking out for us. That perception gap is dangerous. It creates anxiety, it erodes confidence, and it can quietly undermine morale even in organizations that are actually operating pretty safely. So this moment presents a choice. Organizations can interpret reduced oversight as permission to cut corners, or they can interpret it as an opportunity to differentiate, to become known as a place where safety is non-negotiable, regardless of who's in power. The second path is not just ethically stronger, it's strategically smarter. High-trust workplaces outperform low-trust ones in virtually every dimension that matters: retention, productivity, customer satisfaction, innovation, and resilience during a crisis. Safety is one of the fastest ways to build that trust because it's visible, it's tangible, and it's deeply personal. No employee forgets whether or not their employee protected them when it mattered. And no employee forgets when their employer didn't protect them. There's also a longer-term perspective worth keeping in mind. Public policy moves in cycles. Administrations change, regulations expand and they contract, enforcement priorities shift, but the world of work is not permanently shaped by any single political moment. Organizations that anchor their strategy to short-term regulatory climate change often find themselves scrambling when the pendulum swings back. And those that anchor themselves to the enduring principles of dignity, trust, well-being, safety, well, they'll remain stable regardless of who occupies the office. So here's the call to action for HR leaders, business leaders, and anyone responsible for people. Don't treat safety as just a compliance task. Treat it as a leadership commitment. Audit your safety practices now, not because an inspector might show up, but because your employees are already watching. Invest in training, modernize your equipment, and encourage reporting of hazards without fear or retribution. Make safety metrics as visible as your financial metrics, and hold leaders accountable for safety in operations, not just operational results. And communicate clearly that your safety here matters always. Because in uncertain times, trust becomes your most valuable organizational asset. And trust begins with the belief that you will not allow people to be harmed in pursuit of business outcomes. If government oversight is stepping back, responsible leadership must step forward. That's the test of values. And organizations that pass that test will be the ones employees choose to stay with, customers choose to support, and communities choose to respect, long after today's headlines fade and a new administration is making the rules. That's it for today's Workplace Minute. Thanks so much for listening, and a big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute. If this episode made you think about how your organization ensures the safety of everyone at work, please share it with a colleague. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.